Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this December 12th, 2013 edition of Nightcast. In the news tonight, the UN is warning that hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees are at risk as the worst winter storm in decades sweeps across the Middle East. Officials say they are deeply concerned as blizzards and freezing rain have hit the region. Heavy snowstorms have delayed an airlift of aid, and in the area most affected by the storm, the Bekaa region, 125,000 refugees are living in freezing conditions in tents. Oh, dear friends, there are many reasons in tonight's news, especially this story, to be praying from the heart, Thy kingdom come. And there's something else about this winter storm we should also be remembering about what we should be praying. As you maybe think about that while we hear this report, I'll have more to say on that after Jeremy Bowen gives us the conditions on this snowstorm.
Winter came in hard and fast. More snow is forecast and more war a few miles away in Syria, which means more refugees, more people in tents, more cold, more misery. 2 weeks ago, it was still warm enough in Lebanon not to worry about having a sweater or a jacket. Some Syrian refugee children are still virtually barefoot. Snow melted in places, turning the camps to mud. The Lebanese government doesn't allow aid agencies to build properly run camps. They don't want the Syrians to be like the Palestinian refugees who are still here in camps 65 years after their grandparents fled or were ejected from Israel in 1948. Hassan al-Omar, a farmer from the Aleppo countryside, was trying to restore power to his family's shelter in one of the 250 informal refugee settlements in the Bekaa Valley. Mr. Hassan and his wife have had some help from Britain, but not enough. His 8 children, like so many others, have plastic sandals. Inside, he said the problem is we don't have a proper roof. It was made of old cardboard boxes. The shelter had an earth floor turning steadily into mud. The kids, he said, are freezing. The last 2 nights, it's been too cold to sleep. The family has a small stove, but the air is dank. The only light came from our torches. The Lebanese army, with the UN, gave out some bedding. 4 million Lebanese are sheltering almost 1 million Syrian refugees. It's the same as Britain taking in 15 million people, and even with international help, it is an immense strain.
We understand that it's a big challenge. We hope that we'll be able to cover everyone, but the numbers are rising on a daily basis, and these settlements are our biggest concern.
Here, refugees were angry because there weren't enough mattresses to go round. Winter supplies still haven't reached many of them.
Donor countries have given a lot of money to help Syrian refugees, but the problem's always been that there are so many of them, increasing numbers, that the funding has never kept up with their needs. There's fighting going on not all that far from here, on the other side of those mountains. More Syrians leave their country every day. As long as the war goes on, this is a problem that will only get worse.
Over the border in Syria, this is Homs, international attempts to stop the war have failed. In Lebanon, as in all Syria's Arab neighbours, the refugees are being helped. But so much more could be done.
Okay, we want to thank the BBC's Jeremy Bowen for that report. Friends, I'm going to go to a lighter story next, but first I want to tell you, before we go to that lighter story, I want to tell you, I told you I'd mention something about the winter weather that we should be praying about. And let me put that slide back up on the screen for a moment. And that is, we are in, those of you who understand what I'm saying now, when I remind you that Jesus Christ told us to pray that a certain escape that hopefully you who are watching will understand and be accounted worthy of before the Great Tribulation comes, we were encouraged and instructed to pray that our escape be not on the Sabbath, nor in the winter time. And the story we just heard gave good reason with Jeremy Bowen's report. Some of the people there in this freezing, terribly snowy, cold, freezing weather in the tents, not able to sleep at night because of the cold. And if you can imagine what it's like trying to flee and escape in conditions treacherous and cold like this in the winter, it's good motivation to be praying now ahead of time, as Christ instructed us to do, that our escape be not on the Sabbath nor in the winter time. Just a friendly reminder for those of you who understand what I'm saying, what I'm talking about there. Now, we've got some pretty heavy stories tonight, some military-related stories and executions, and a story related to the EU. And but before we go to those, I want to go to a light story, as I said, kind of a light story. The sign language interpreter accused of using fake hand signals at Nelson Mandela's memorial the other day has said that he suffered a schizophrenic episode. Thamsanqa Jantjie, 34 years old, told the BBC's Ross Atkins that he saw angels coming into the stadium. Now, friends, many of you know, some of you who tune in here may not know, there are two kinds of angels. There are faithful angels and there are fallen angels, or in other words, demons. And when Jesus Christ walked this earth, what was one of the main healing things that he did? He casting out demons. And and someone with schizophrenia, that's probably what we're looking at here. As he talks in this video, you'll hear him talk very softly, almost feebly sounding. He's done deaf interpreting before, so it's not like maybe the French guy that pretended to be a doctor and actually learned how to do surgeries with never having been to medical school at all, and finally wound up getting caught that he didn't have any papers or certificates or was not really trained as a doctor, but somehow managed to work as that for a long time. I don't think you could even, be pretty hard to fake, for any length of time at all. And he says that some of his signing, not all of it was rubbish, as some deaf persons in the audience were claiming. He says, some of it was genuine. But deaf viewers at the memorial service said he was signing rubbish, and they complained that he was a fraud. He himself said he was aware that he might not have been signing exactly what people were saying.
On the day question, while I was working, which is not a part of an excuse, while I was working, I had a breakdown when I see angels come from sky to the ground. And I start knowing that I'm not well, because it's not something possible. But believe me, I saw them coming on stage. From that moment, it was not myself. And from that time, you must ask yourself of your safety and your security and safety of other people that are around you.
Were you aware that the sign language that you were doing might have been wrong?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will see yes, I will say not all of it, as they put it.
Okay, friends, there's the story on that. A little bit of a lighter story, perhaps, to start on that one. A little more serious story. The once powerful uncle of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has been executed after being purged for corruption, state news agency KCNA reports. Chang Song-thaek was dramatically removed from a Communist Party session by armed guards earlier this week. He was accused of forming factions against the state corruption. Well, I'm sorry. I'm thinking ahead too fast. He was accused of forming factions against the state. And he was also accused of corruption and depraved acts such as womanizing and drug abuse. It was the biggest upheaval since Mr. Kim succeeded his father 2 years ago. Lucy Williamson reports.
He was not only the uncle to Kim Jong-un, but he held very senior positions, both military positions and party positions. He was the guy who was given the responsibility of overseeing the transition to power from the father to the son. So really a very key role at the heart of North Korean politics, which makes what has happened the last few days so striking. Those pictures you might have seen on our coverage of him being hauled from a party meeting by armed guards, literally holding him up under his arms and dragging him out. It's the kind of thing that you just don't see in North Korea. And the fact that the country is publicizing his fall from grace like this is really very striking. Here again, we're learning about the military tribunal that took place on Thursday, December the 12th, that his crimes were again listed, again in a bit more detail. We're being told that he was appointed to responsible posts, but abused that responsibility, formed a faction, attempted to overthrow the state, and was guilty of having political ambitions of his own. And then we're told he was executed straight after that tribunal, during which he admitted to those crimes.
And friends, that's not the only story of an execution in today's news. There is another one. A senior Islamist leader has been executed in Bangladesh for atrocities committed during the country's 1971 War of Independence. Abdul Kader Mullah of the Jamaat-e-Islami Party was the first person convicted by Bangladesh's International Crimes Tribunal, ITC, to be hanged. Mahfuz Sadiq reports from Dhaka.
The man accused of being the butcher of Mirpur, executed by hanging just hours after the Supreme Court rejected his last-ditch appeal. Abdul Kader Mullah was convicted of crimes against humanity by a special war crimes tribunal, but he's always denied the charges. His party, the Jamaat-e-Islami, says the death sentence was politically motivated and have already called for protests, prayers and a general strike over the weekend. Hours before his death, his family paid him a final visit. His son said his father was proud to be a martyr for the Islamic cause. There have been many weeks of escalating tension here. Extra police and paramilitary guards were deployed across the capital and throughout the country as soon as the court's ruling was announced. But in at least 3 major cities, party activists made clear their anger at the ruling, clashing with police and torching vehicles. Here at the central jail in Old Dhaka, after hours of speculation, the man convicted of massacres of unarmed civilians during a war that brought independence for this nation was executed. For many Bangladeshis, it's the beginning of the end of a long path to justice for atrocities committed more than 4 decades ago. But closure is coming at a high cost. Abdul Kader Mullah was the first person to be hanged for war crimes in Bangladesh. Several other Islamist leaders are on death row for their part in the conflict, in which 3 million people are believed to have died and at least 200,000 women were raped. This execution complicates an already critical political situation in Bangladesh. The opposition alliance, including Jamaat, are boycotting the elections due to be held next month. But for now at least, for some people, there is a sense that justice has finally been done. Mahfouz Sadiq, BBC News, Dhaka.
And friends, the news from Ukraine on the protesters who are against stronger ties with Russia and who are in favor of stronger ties with the EU. They're being called pro-EU protesters, but they're not protesting against the EU. They're protesting against ties with Russia. They're pro-EU, and they are protesters. They are protesting in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, and they show no sign of abandoning their camps. They want President Viktor Yanukovych to sign a deal on closer European ties. EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton said the president has assured her he would sign the agreement, but no timetable had been set. Daniel Sanford reports from Independence Square in Kiev.
We're here at one of the main barricades at Independence Square, also known as the Maidan. You can see the men who've been up all night here to defend it in case the riot police came. In the end, no police came last night, compared to hundreds who'd come the previous night. Hundreds of riot police tried to come down this hill and were held back by a sea of protesters. So in the end, the protesters spent the night keeping themselves warm, and you can see down on the square also the main stage where hundreds have stayed overnight. You can hear the morning prayers. Hundreds of people there, I should say, even though it's only just after dawn. Overnight, the US Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said that he'd spoken to his Ukrainian counterpart Pavel Lebedyev and implored him not to use Ministry of Defense troops against the protesters, though in fact we've never seen any Ministry of Defense troops here. What we have seen is troops from the Ministry of Interior. And you can see the sense of permanence down here on the Maidan. Medical tents, firewood stored for the cold nights, generators, tents everywhere where people are staying the night, where they're making food and storing equipment. And as the people sit it out here on the Maidan, there is a movement towards trying to get some kind of negotiations going between the government and the leaders of the opposition. European diplomats are trying to encourage everyone to get around the table. President Yanukovych said last night that he was ready for talks, but the opposition say that they need to have some of the demands of these protesters met before they'll sit around the table with President Yanukovych.
And friends, that's it for this Thursday night edition of Nightcast, news related to the Bible and prophecy. We'll be back again Sunday evening, God willing, and the creek don't freeze over, with another edition of Nightcast on the weekend on the Sabbath Service channel this weekend, for those of you who might want to tune in for that or catch it in the archive on demand, playable anytime. I'll have a sermon by Mr. Herbert Armstrong, and I'll be discussing the subject, the difference between Islam and Muslim. You may want to tune in for that. Until next time, friends, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.